From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
You're listening to the Wildcast podcast. I'm Justin Spears here with Michael Lev. Please subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And for all coverage of Arizona sports, go to Tucson.com and the Wildcaster app.
Anything going on, Justin, since we last did a podcast?
Man, we were talking about what's next for Arizona football in the podcast. And that was also when Arizona had Jedd Fisch as their head coach. A lot has happened in the last week that has felt like a month. Like just over a week ago, Nick Saban, the greatest college football coach of all time, decides to retire. And then it leads to Alabama's coaching search opening up, led by athletic director and former Arizona AD, Greg Byrne, who then hires Washington's Kalen DeBoer, who led the Huskies to a national championship appearance, great season at Washington. They went undefeated up until the national championship game, and Kalen DeBoer is one of the best coaches in the game right now. So Alabama finds their guy quickly, and then Washington's coaching search opens up. And one thing leads to another. Jedd Fisch becomes the head coach of the Washington Huskies. Things ramped up real quickly going into last weekend. As Lev and I, we were talking to all sorts of people who were involved in this situation, and man, it got really serious. And Arizona Athletic Director Dave Hickey, unfortunately, was held captive in Pullman, Washington because of plane issues, and they were unable to get back to Tucson until Sunday. But man, it's just been such a wild week. Like the domino effect in college football is unbelievable. It goes from a legend retiring, and then all of a sudden, San Jose State's looking for a new head coach, and we'll talk about that here in just a little bit.
There are a couple other, I think, Group of Five schools lost their head coaches who became assistants at Alabama too.
Wow!
So I think it's had an impact on 5 schools overall. I was thinking as you were talking about that, just like dominoes falling. GIF, right? I mean,
yep.
It's been really incredible. I didn't use this quote in my column today, which was mostly about just how Dave Hickey had a mad scramble on his hands and he had no choice because of the way things are. But he said, someone asked him, like, when did you start interviewing people? And he said, I got to get my timeline right. It's felt like 3 weeks, but I guess it's been only 3 days. So, I mean, just think about it. We're recording this podcast on a Thursday
morning.
Right? Brent Brennan was hired on a Tuesday, 2 days after Jedd Fisch left for Washington, which was 2 days after Kalen DeBoer left for Alabama, which was 2 days after Nick Saban retired. Like 48 hours, taking on a whole new meaning.
Man, no kidding.
Just complete craziness. And I think when the playoff expands and the season gets longer, that it's going to be even nuttier.
Yep.
They're going to have to figure something out to create an actual offseason that's not like going on during the season, because that's the way things are now, like December and January. It's just overlap between the two. But anyway, here we are. We are going to talk a little bit about the Jedd Fisch situation before we move on and move past that, because we haven't been able to do that in this particular platform.
Yeah, and also potentially some key players
possibly
coming back.
Oh, yeah.
After a magical night at McHale Center against USC.
Yeah, a big to-do. So let's start with this. Let me ask you, Justin, what do you think of looking back at the Jedd Fisch era, 3 years? Net positive, for sure. What is his legacy?
Net positive. Brent Brennan, he interviewed for the job when Jedd Fisch was. And that rebuild was a daunting task. I mean, you're facing a team that is gutted, a team that is so broken, and it felt like the spirit of Arizona football. And I know that traditionally Arizona football is not considered a blue blood or a powerhouse, but there still have been some very important chapters of Arizona football, and it felt like that was just kind of ripped out. The program lost all of its spirit, and those players who have been through so much, they were going through some really hard times. And then this guy by the name of Jedd Fisch, who was on nobody's radar during that coaching search. I mean, when we put together hot boards and coaching candidates, Jedd Fisch was nowhere near our list. And Jedd Fisch takes over a program and inherits a roster filled with guys from the Kevin Sumlin era and also walk-ons, and they go 1-11. But then they sell the vision of Arizona football and what it could be to a very impressive 2022 recruiting class like Tetairoa, McMillan, Noah Fifita, Jacob Manu, Kean Burnett, Ephesians Prysock, Takaru Davis, Jonas Avianea. I mean, I can go on and on and on. That's not even the transfer portal guys, too. They bring those guys to Tucson. They go 5-7. Okay, a significant improvement from 1-11. And then you go into your third season, which was really what Jedd Fisch called year 2, after bolstering up the defense and getting some bigger bodies and more experienced players. Now it was a good mixture of guys. And then Arizona got a lightning in the bottle season. They go 10-3. There was a quarterback change. Noah Fifita became a star. And the Wildcats rattled off 7 straight wins to end the season, and they beat Oklahoma in the Alamo Bowl. And then everything was so on the up and up. And then the good thing for Arizona was that all these guys were going to come back. And they still could, right? The crazy things happen in college football. But the way the roster was built, Arizona could have easily had a top 15, top 10 team going into next year. And with the college football playoff expanding to 12 teams, we're talking about Arizona possibly contending for a national championship in year 4 under Jedd Fisch. So considering where the program was at and where Jedd Fisch left it, now he could gut it, but I do think he is right in the sense that he left the program in a better place than when he found it. And now the base has been set, and Brent Brennan can really continue to build on to what Jedd Fisch has repaired.
I would argue that the 2022 recruiting class was the most impressive thing that Jedd Fisch pulled off here, even more so than the 10-3 season that followed. Getting that good of a recruiting class with the state that the program was in, just amazing. And of course, it's a cause and effect. I mean, that was the foundation of the team that ended up going 10-3. So really amazing, great work by him and his staff. And then he was rewarded for that 5-7 season, all the good work he had done with a contract extension in December of 2022. Okay.
Yep.
Which is basically after 1 year.
1 year.
Right? Am I my math right?
Yep.
I mean, 2 seasons, but really had only been around for 1 year plus.
Yeah.
So he's got this deal, and he's still on the low end of the salary scale, to be sure, but it goes through 2027, and expectations are, they're rising, but they're still kind of medium, right? Going into that, we all thought maybe 7-5, something like that. I don't think anyone projected them to go better than 7-5.
No,
they catch fire. There was a sliding doors moment that happened at Stanford, to be sure, with Jayden Delore getting injured and Noah Fifita coming in. And there are people who believe that if that hadn't happened, that maybe we'd be having a totally different conversation right now, that they might not have gone 10-3. But it did, and Noah Fifita was amazing, and so it all did take place. And then Jedd is in this position where, he's not being really paid at market value, and he and his people want to get another deal done.
Yep.
And so they start, engaging in negotiations probably mid-November or so. Meanwhile, at the exact same time, it turns out that, the University of Arizona has had a major miscalculation. So $240 million went missing somehow. Maybe about a third of that attributable to athletics, maybe 2/3 of it to other parts of the university, but still a very big deal.
Yeah.
Like a huge, they called it a financial crisis from a PR standpoint. I mean, people are just kind of making fun of the school. It's bad. They're talking about hiring freezes and layoffs and all this stuff. So not the ideal time to be giving the football coach a raise. All that being said, and we've gone through all of that stuff, in print and various platforms, I feel like if both sides really, really, truly wanted to get it done, that they could have.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
Yeah. And, based off of what you've gathered, talking to some people, that it was a done deal. Like they had a gentleman's agreement, and they all went into the offseason saying, hey, we're going to get a deal done. Jedd Fisch went on Jim Rome's show saying, we want to be here for a long time, or I'm not going anywhere. We just got to work through the semantics and all of that. And then a week later, he's accepting the job at Washington. So, listen, the deal was done. However, based off of what we know, Arizona Board of Regents, they were like, listen, we have our meeting in February. Okay, we'll do January. Was it January 21st or 25th? Yeah. We'll do. Okay, so it was February 21st was the original date. The January 25th, that's when they were like, okay, we'll do it then.
That was how long? How far out is that in Fisch years, if you will?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I mean, January 25th.
That's a week from when
might
we're
as well be 2029.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, the ABOR situation was a problem.
They stalled?
Was it something that could not be overcome?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that they wanted Jedd Fisch to be here, and he wanted to be here, and somehow it didn't come together.
Yeah.
Now, you can argue that even if he had signed the contract extension, that maybe he would have left anyway. I don't know about that. I mean, it's definitely possible. Maybe Washington wouldn't have looked his way because the buyout would have been so much larger.
Yeah.
Maybe they wouldn't have cared.
Yeah.
Maybe Jedd Fisch's people would have put out feelers saying, we're not interested in other jobs at this time. You know? I think I wrote this. Like, I don't think Jedd Fisch was going to be a lifer here.
No.
Brent Brennan, the new coach, he might be if things work out for him and he does a good job. And I also think that the whole thing would have felt different if Jedd had stayed for one more year.
Yeah. Because then if he goes off to his job at Florida or the NFL, Arizona fans can stomach that better. They can process and be like, listen, okay, you do what's best for you, Jedd. That's your dream.
Let's not get away with it. In a sense, you've seen it through, right? You have gotten to the third year for those guys in the class of 2022. And a lot of those guys probably would have gone to the NFL anyway.
Yes.
And no one holds a grudge if a player goes to the NFL. If you go to another school that like where our coach is now there, they used to be in our conference. Like, it's a lot of bitter feelings there, you know. Yeah. But it's entirely possible that Tetairoa McMillan, who might stay, we'll get to that later. Jonah Coleman, Jonas Sava-Inaya, Takario Davis, Ephesians Prysock, these could all conceivably be 3-and-done players.
Yep.
And if it all like that was the end of that chapter after that season, and they had a great year and they won the Big 12 and they went to the playoff or whatever happened, I think people would have been okay with it. Now, if you're Jedd Fisch, though, all right, we have seen cases of guys who stay at a job, like what you'd call like a kind of a mid-tier job. They do not strike while the iron is hot, and they end up stuck in those spots. Remember Matt Campbell was like all the rage a few years ago, and he didn't jump for a bigger job, and he's still at Iowa State.
Yep.
Going 7-5.
Yep. Or
whatever, which is about what the best you can expect from one of our new rivals over there at Iowa State, right? Jedd Fisch, if he came back for another year, there's no guarantee they would have been good. Noah Fifita could have gotten injured.
Yeah.
For example, or they could have had a bunch of injuries, or they could have just had bad luck in one-loss games, or maybe the Big 12 is harder than we thought it was going to be. And what if they went, 7-5, let's just say, next year?
You lose the sizzle.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah. Exactly. You're not as hot a candidate as you were coming off this 10-3 season.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of variables and factors that went into this whole thing. Bottom line, both sides decided to move on.
Yeah. And Washington came in with money that Arizona just could not compete with, right? And I'm all about bettering your lifestyle, providing for your family. However, I do understand why Arizona fans and people close to the situation feel a little bit hurt or maybe a little bit betrayed because, Jedd Fisch had has talked about on multiple podcasts. He's talked about it with us in regards to players entering the portal. And, if you're great here, why not be great again and then carve out a 10-year NFL career, right? Don't go chasing NIL money. Stay here and then become a pro. We're going to turn you into a pro. And to me, I felt like a situation that's equivalent to this for Jedd Fisch is his dream job at Florida or the NFL. You've been great in 2023. You took Arizona 10-3. Why not come back and be great again? And that way your dream job opens up. But instead, he followed the money to Washington, and he's told players, don't chase the bag. Don't go other places. And we know that Arizona players were facing some NIL opportunities to go elsewhere. And Jedd did such a great job of campaigning to keep these guys at Arizona, and then he jumps ship. It's just, I don't know. To me, I like Jedd Fisch a lot. I have no beef with Jedd Fisch whatsoever, but I could see why people would seem like it's hypocritical.
Yeah, man. Breaking up is hard to do, right? People are hurt here. They're heartbroken. They feel like they were misled. I do think that Jedd Fisch meant what he said when he's talking about not chasing the bag.
Yeah.
But then it looks bad when it appears that he did that very thing. That was kind of the theme of my column that I wrote earlier in the week. It's don't follow the money, but then they showed him the money, and it was impossible to turn down the money.
And he signed it quicker than you could say it's personal.
That was the end. Hey, don't give away the ending, man.
I love it, man.
So yeah, look, it's not just money up there; it's resources too. Washington spends more money on football. He has a bigger assistant salary pool. I don't know the reason that Kevin Cummings didn't end up staying here with Brent Brennan, whom he's known and worked for in the past. But I imagine that Washington stepped up pretty big time.
Yeah.
To give him what he wanted to make him happy up there. He and his family. So there's more that goes into it than just money, but money talks, and 7 years is another factor. You can't give a 7-year contract in Arizona. You can only give 5 years. That's the max. So even if he had gotten a new deal here, it still would have been only through 2028.
I still chuckle at 7 years though. Over under 2.5 years, Jedd Fisch is at Washington.
Yeah, yes. Okay. So, how many times have we, as the college football punditry, criticized a school like Texas A&M for giving Jimbo Fisher a giant contract?
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, we're all like, why didn't Jedd Fisch get a better contract here? So which is it? Maybe the people at Arizona were just we have given you a reasonable offer, and we're just not going to move past that. And if that's not good enough for you, then it's not good enough, and we'll move on to something or someone else.
And sure enough, they moved on.
That's what we call in the business a segue.
A segue.
Justin.
Well, Jedd Fisch moved on from Arizona, and then Arizona turned the page, as we're turning the page, onto Brent Brennan, the 31st head coach of Arizona Wildcats football, coming over from
the fourth head coach since I've been here, by the way.
Oh my gosh.
December 2015 was when I landed in Tucson.
So we got
we're
Rich
number
Rod,
4. Yep.
Rich Rod, Kevin Sumlin, Jedd Fisch, and now Brent Brennan. And Brent Brennan actually has been a head coach of a game at Arizona Stadium. He was the head coach of San Jose State when they came down here for the Arizona Bowl.
And almost wasn't, because they barely had enough players to play in that game because of COVID. They ended up getting blown out by Ball State, and they were so shorthanded in that game. It was kind of like when Cal came here and for the streak-ending game. It was very similar to that. Did you know that they had to practice at Humboldt State, that training camp of 2020?
Because of county rules?
Which is because of Santa Clara County restrictions. It was 320 miles away from their campus.
Oh.
They had to go there. Bus down there.
It's from here, North Phoenix, right?
320 miles? No. That's That's about 5 hours away.
Oh,
so that's
man.
like almost to San Diego, like
Jeez Louise.
maybe, I don't know, maybe Yuma is a better comparison. We should just there are ways to look these things up, but we're just going to move past
ridiculous.
that. But anyway, that game almost didn't happen. And then the next year's Arizona Bowl didn't happen, which was very sad for everybody. Boise couldn't make it down here. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. He has been a coach at Arizona Stadium as a head coach.
And you know what's weird is they played against Ball State, and Stanley Berryhill, former Arizona receiver, he was committed to Ball State
for about 5 minutes. Yeah,
and then he came back to Arizona. So see, people, you can go into the portal, you can actually commit somewhere, but then you can say, "Nah, I'm good. We're coming back." So it's possible that things can change. So I know people are looking at guys entering the portal left and right. They could easily all come back out. But anyways, Brent Brennan is the new head coach of Arizona, and you look at his resume, and pretty impressive. And if you're looking at continuity and staying here long term, the man doesn't have many stops as a coach. I mean, since 2005, he's been at 2 places. He's been at Oregon State, and then he's also been at San Jose State. He's coached under Mike Riley at Oregon State, coached some very impressive receivers like Marcus Wheaton and Biletnikoff award winner Brandon Cooks, along with Kevin Cummings, who's joining Jedd Fisch's staff at Washington and was thought to maybe come to Arizona. And then he's been the head coach at San Jose State. And people are going to look at his record and like, oh, he's sub 500. He has a losing record. Jedd Fisch doesn't have a winning record at Arizona, but take things into perspective. Jedd Fisch also went 1-11 in his first year. Brent Brennan took over San Jose State, which is hard to win at with the resources. I mean, it's San Jose's. I mean, cost of living.
Yeah, I put
all
this.
That. It's crazy.
I referenced this in my second column of the week or third. I don't know who can keep track of these things these days. It was about like the 3 reasons why Brent Brennan was the right guy for the job. And one of them was how he did more with less. And I referenced this piece in The Athletic from last fall where it was revealed that he had to do fundraising just so that the players could have breakfast at the facility. They had their swipe cards for lunch and dinner. They didn't have the funding for breakfast.
They don't have that problem.
They had broken goalposts at the practice field that they shared with men's and women's soccer. They had to set up and take down the folding chairs for team meetings. Now, like 2 of the 3 of those, I would say, are first world problems, right? But another way of looking at it is that's not how it is at a school like Arizona.
No.
Like you have way better resources. It's like a different world altogether. So I'd say San Jose State, one of the 5 hardest jobs in the country, maybe, among FBS programs to win. And he won 7 games 3 times in the last 4 years.
Mount West Coach of the Year?
Pretty dang good. 7-1 in the COVID year, the year where they had to practice at Humboldt State. Then they dipped to 5-7. He talked about that a little bit during his introductory press conference, saying that he learned from that hey, like coming off a season like that, you need to push harder even than you did before. And so that was a good lesson. Then 7-5, 7-6 this past year. I think they were 1-5 and then won like 6 in a row before dropping their bowl game. But just a really, really hard place. And I think a common thread between San Jose State and Oregon State is those are places where you have to find those hidden gems.
Yeah.
And you have to have an eye for talent because you're not going to get 4-star players at those spots. At Arizona, you'll get what? 2 or 3 per class at best.
Yeah.
You got to find those diamonds in the rough and develop them. And he and his staff have a track record of doing that.
Mm. But as Jedd Fisch has proven, you can attract some pretty good recruits to come to Arizona. And Brennan has talked about, we got all the resources, we got everything that we need to recruit at a high level and start winning here. And I think that the resources, like you said, Lev, it's a completely different world for Brent Brennan. And on top of that, man, he's got the background that a lot of Arizona fans love. He's a Dick Tomey guy. He was a graduate assistant for him in 2000. According to him, he has a decent commitment from Dwayne Aquina, the longtime Arizona defensive assistant, in joining his staff. the longest. I'm pretty sure he's got the most years of assistant coaches in Arizona football program history. The man's coached for so many different head coaches at Arizona. It's unreal. So getting Dwayne Aquino would be awesome, but he talked about the legacy that Dick Tomey left behind. And honestly, like Lev, it was really interesting being in that introductory press conference yesterday because you have Chuck Cecil, Ricky Hundley, Brandon Sanders are in there, Arizona football legends. And then you got Mike Candrea, Arizona softball legend, showing up. Arizona baseball coach Chip Hale was there. Adia Barnes, all the head coaches were there. Just a lot of people crammed inside that room. And then the wife of Dick Tomey was sitting there front row. And Brennan like almost couldn't look at her without tearing up. And I thought that said a lot. And Dave Hickey, when he was talking about Dick Tomey's legacy, started to tear up and get emotional. That was surprising to me, honestly.
That was really interesting. Can we talk about someone who wasn't there?
Who?
Dr. Robbins.
Oh, yeah.
School president.
A little sick? Under the
weather?
weather?
He was under the weather. Which, I mean, hey, I have no reason to think he wasn't. I don't think he was at the basketball game either, so he probably was under the weather. But I will say that I got the impression from yesterday that this was a Dave Hickey hire. 100%. Like, he was really excited and pumped up about this.
Yep.
I'm not sure the previous two hires were entirely Dave Hickey hires.
That's a good point. Well, because Kevin Sumlin, the splashy name at the time, Robbins being a big football guy like Jerry Jones, and he was the hottest name on the market and was kind of forced onto Arizona. And Arizona got Kevin Sumlin. They thought with Khalil Tate, maybe they could, have some of the similar magic that he had with Johnny Manziel, and Arizona football is going to start winning games. And then Jedd Fisch, he was a part of the first hiring process, right, when Kevin Sumlin got the job. So there's already familiarity there. And Robbins has said that he's met Jedd prior to when he applied for the head coach. So I didn't even think of that, Lev. That's a very interesting point there.
Yeah, for whatever it's worth. So regarding Dick Tomey, that's a great storyline, of course, and the lessons that Brent Brennan has learned from him, they still apply today. All that being said, he also needs to kind of move forward from that and establish his own legacy here.
Sure.
You can keep applying the lessons, and heck, it's called the Dick Tomey practice field, so there's a big, sign and image of him out there, and he'll be reminded of it every day, but he's got a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
in the here and now. And I'm sure he's busy doing it. We're gonna talk to him on Friday. He's gonna do a bunch of media stuff, but today, Thursday, he's probably rolled his sleeves up and is working on staffing. There's a whole, one of the great things that Jedd Fisch did here was he built up this front office. Right? I remember doing a story about how it's sort of like doing an NFL style front office, and you have to have the director of player personnel or the general manager, or the scouting, the transfer portal scout, you got to have all that stuff and more. They probably didn't have that at San Jose State because they couldn't, but you can now.
Yeah.
So get in your phone if you're Brent Brennan and get some people in here who can help you to retain the current players and identify the next wave. Because, look, Jedd Fisch was a crappy play caller in 2021, wasn't he?
Because he didn't have the Jimmies and the Joes.
All of a sudden, he gets Jaden DeLora, Jacob Cowing, Tanner McLaughlin, and man, that offense was humming the next 2 years. Johnny Nansen, what a terrible defensive coordinator he was in 2022. What happens in 23? Young guys get older. They bring in a few guys from the portal. All of a sudden, he's a hot name, the defensive coordinator that you can't lose. So it's about the people. That's what he said. That was a big theme of Brent Brennan, and the most important people are the players. You got to have dudes in here. And like I said, he and his staff do have a good track record of identifying those players, and they're going to have to do that. But priority one, try to keep a handful of guys.
Yeah.
Few important fellows that we tell us what the scene was like at McHale last night.
So Bronny James was playing. There's your Bronny James coverage of this podcast.
I'm going to be writing about Bronny, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
A little bit. Well, it's kind of about the LA basketball, but
okay.
There's a lot of Bronny.
Kevin Durant was in the building last night at McHale Center. So that's a big deal. And then
who was sitting near Kevin Durant?
T-Mac, Tetairoa McMillan, and Jonah Coleman, and Jacob Manu, and Noah Fifita.
And Noah's mom.
And how could we forget? Winona. At Spam and Eggs on Twitter, I believe. And we see the key pieces of the 2023 team walking in, and all of a sudden they're taking photos with Brent Brennan off to the side. I thought when Brent Brennan was going to walk out on the court and hold the microphone and, hype up the McHale Center crowd, I was waiting for Noah and T-Mac to flank him and stand side by side, and it was just like this moving moment. That did not happen, but I do think it is a very encouraging sign that your star quarterback, who was recruited by your predecessor and is a great quarterback, one of the top passers in college football, and the highest rated signee in Arizona football history in T-Mac. Those guys being there, I thought, said a lot. And Jonah Coleman, who said he's entering the transfer portal, him being there, and he's Arizona's leading rusher and is just an absolute bruiser of a running back. Like, this guy's an absolute stud. He's going to be playing on Sundays. And then your leader on your defense, Jacob Manu, who just led the Pac-12 in tackles, having those core pieces there and being alongside the new head coach, man, I thought that said so much. Now, there's a possibility that they pump fake everyone and decide to follow Jedd to Washington or go elsewhere, or put out feelers to see, where their best opportunity is for playing wise and also NIL wise. But man, to have those guys sign off on you and show support for you, I think that says a lot about Brent Brennan and the first impression that he's left on these guys.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to stay, but man, it was definitely a lot of hope that was generated by those guys being there. Like Manu, I had binoculars. I was on the opposite side of the court, but I was watching what was going on over there in the corner, maybe more so than what was going on the court. And like Manu and Jonah Coleman, they had their arms around each other. Like they were palling around in a big way. And I was like, okay, does this mean goodbye? Or does this mean hey, we're in this thing for at least another year together, And here's the thing too, okay? You can go through spring practice and see what it's like if you're Jonah Coleman, Noah Fifita, Tetairoa McMillan. And then you can get in the portal after that if you want to. There's another window that opens up in the spring.
Yeah.
And so it's a great thing for the players to have that kind of flexibility. So you could give it a try. See what the coaches are like. See what the offense is like, and find out if it's a good fit or not. You don't have to make a decision today. We've had 10, 11, 12 players go in the portal in the last 24 to 48 hours or so.
Yeah,
a lot of big names.
Yep.
Takario Davis, Ephesians Pricesock, Raymond Polito. I guess the freshmen. Technically they're in the portal since they were the early enrollees, like Damon Williams, the quarterback. They're going to lose several good players.
Yeah.
But you know what? Alabama's lost a bunch of good players already. That's just the world that we live in.
But Alabama's got some pretty prominent backups.
They do. Yeah, they do. But any time that there's a coaching change, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
It just is. So to me, it's I think I wrote this. It's who and how many.
Yeah.
And then how do you kind of backfill from there? And if they can keep Noah Fifita, then I think they can keep Tetairoa McMillan. And that is the foundation right there. Yeah. That is a huge, huge deal. And maybe if they can keep those guys, they can keep Jonah Sava-Inaya, whose name has not popped up in the portal as of this recording. But I think a key piece to this whole thing staying together, because offensive linemen are really hard to find.
Yep.
Especially good ones who can play multiple positions. So that would be those three to me would be a huge deal to keep them around. I don't think Arizona would be a preseason. If they lost, let's say they lost half a dozen guys who we consider to be, good, important players. Probably not going to be a top 15 team, but maybe you're a top 25 team. Maybe you got a shot.
Yeah.
If everybody leaves, then you're in rebuilding mode.
Yeah.
Again. Because
looking at their schedule, they have a couple tough games. Like I think TCU
I think the road schedule is tough. Road schedule's tough.
Both Utah schools, BYU, Utah, that's going to be tough.
At Kansas State in the non-con, man, they should have figured out a way to get out of that.
I know. But, it's still with the team that Arizona has. If they return most of these guys, Arizona, I would think, is going to be competitive and at least stay in these games and have a chance to win. And maybe they don't go 10-3, but I still think that they will have a fighter's chance at every single game, even if they're considered underdogs.
And there's still a lot of players in the portal who haven't committed to schools.
That's true.
And there's going to be more, like I said, after spring. Remember, Taylor Upshaw, leading sacker from this past year, was someone they got in May.
Yeah.
Dylan Wyatt, who ended up playing critical snaps in the Alamo Bowl, is someone that they got
super
in
late.
May. Martell Irby is someone that they got he didn't participate in spring ball, right? Or did he did.
No, he did.
He did.
But he was still working into shape
But he wasn't
I thought he was going to be a special teams player.
Yeah, he wasn't in the initial wave of guys available in the portal. He retired from football, So, they were definitely set up to not have to do any of those things for the 2024 team. That's not the case now. So they have to adapt, they have to adjust. But it was some scene at McHale, and it was really interesting. I was watching those guys taking selfies with fans, and I don't know. Do you do that and then go in the portal the next day?
Yeah.
And I will also say, you can comment on this, but Noah and T-Mac, they're wired differently. You did a 3,000 word story on Noah Fifita. What did you learn about him from talking to all those people?
He is wise beyond his years. He's 19, 20 years old, whatever it is, and he's got the mindset of a guy who's in his 40s and 50s. He is a very mature person, and I also think that Noah appreciates Arizona and Jedd Fisch for giving his opportunity. I also think that they really love it in Tucson, and they love their experience being at the University of Arizona. I also think that having a legacy matters to these guys. And you know what? You can follow Jedd Fisch to Washington, and then T-Mac will go to the NFL, and he's going to go on to be a first-round pick and be a great NFL wide receiver. But I think there's something to staying at a school and kind of building something and having the kind of legacy that carries on for decades. Could you imagine Noah Fifita and T-Mac's legacy in Tucson if they stay and win ball games and go to a bowl with Brent Brennan and kick off this era? They would be absolute legends. Teddy Bruschi type level,
If they had walked on the court, like you said,
the place would have erupted.
Yeah, you've got it made.
Yeah.
For the rest of your life here. Tetairoa McMillan, he could end up, if he stays one more year and has a year similar to this past year, in the conversation for the greatest Arizona Wildcat football player of all time. Right?
Yeah.
No
kidding. Definitely the greatest receiver.
And it doesn't matter what system he's in or what offensive coordinator he's playing for. He's going to get the ball a ton, and he's going to have a ton of production.
And what's
you're gonna build your offense around somebody like Tetairoa McMillan.
And what's Brent Brennan's background?
Coaching wide receivers.
And he is a wide receiver. Played wide receiver.
Yep. That's right. So, yeah, it's an interesting choice for those guys. And like I said, it's not one that they necessarily have to make today.
Yeah.
If they're not ready to make it. You could stick around here, see what it's like. You can always go in the portal later. From a fan perspective, I think it's a really hard time to be a college sports fan in a lot of ways. Because you want to develop this connection to the players, and it's hard to do that when they can leave at any time. And I don't think any of us really begrudge them that freedom, those opportunities that they have, because they should, like everyone else in America, they should be able to kind of seek out whatever their market value is. But it's difficult. Like the idea of Tetairoa McMillan going into the NFL draft with the Block A up there on the screen, or the Washington Purple W.
Yeah.
Like, that'd be hard to stomach.
Yeah.
I think for Arizona fans and people in Tucson. And, look, that shouldn't sway T-Mac one way or the other. He's got to do what's best for him. I'm just saying from a fan perspective, it's not easy.
Those Sunday Night Football player intros, too. Going to have a whole new meaning, too. Tetairoa McMillan, Washington. Like, it's, yeah. But moving forward for Arizona, Brent Brennan is the new leader. We'll figure out what the staff is and what players he's keeping. It's still going to be a very busy time for the program. But I will say this. Comparing him to his predecessor, now there's a possibility that a team comes in and gives Brent Brennan an offer he can't refuse, and he's out of here. There's a non-zero chance that could happen. However, based on the people that we've talked to, based on what we know, like, this is the job for Brent Brennan. I mean,
I think the only other job that might have
UCLA.
It was fallen in this category as UCLA, which is where he went. But we've talked about this on here. Is UCLA a better job than Arizona right now for football?
No.
Or basketball?
Putting butts in seats so hard for them, and
Big Ten,
that
more
schedule.
difficult conference.
Yeah, and also like his wife, Courtney, she is a U of A alumna. She graduated from here.
Yep.
They got married in Tucson, Arizona. Their date night was at Wildflower Restaurant in North Tucson. They love this place. And when I was speaking with Nancy Tomey after the introductory press conference, the one thing that really stood out to me was that they already love this place, so they don't need to learn to love it. Jedd Fisch was an outsider. Yes, he got the stamp of approval from Teddy Bruschi and all these former players who have encountered him or have worked with him in the NFL. But Jedd Fisch had to kind of settle into Tucson and really embrace it.
Which he did.
Which he did. He totally did. But Brent Brennan, he doesn't need to learn to love Tucson because he's already familiar with this place. It does look a little bit different than the last time he was considered a coach here. They didn't have the facility. They didn't have all that. Lots of things have been put in place for Arizona football. But what I'm trying to make here is that he understands Tucson. He understands the culture. And he understands what it's going to take for this program to start winning some ball games. And I think that even when he's winning, I don't think you got to worry about people coming in and poaching the head coach. Not after 3 years either.
We saw the ceiling for this program, I would say, this past year, right? I mean, 10-3, that's about as good as it gets.
Yep.
Okay. Does Brent Brennan have as high a ceiling as a head coach? Can he do what Jedd Fisch did?
Well, I mean, his brother was on the 12-1 team.
It's true.
Brad Brennan.
If he can't, but he's willing to be the coach here for the next 12 years, and you got a bunch of 7-5s and maybe an 8-4, the occasional 10-win season every 7 or 8 years or whatever, every once in a blue moon, is that okay? Is that an acceptable trade-off? And I don't want to put a ceiling on Brent Brennan because we do not know what he's capable of.
Yeah.
Like I said, San Jose State, really, really hard job, and he won 7 games there 3 times.
Yeah.
So if he can do that there, I think what I said is he did more with less there, and he can do even more with more here. But the ceiling question, what's your take on it?
You are right that 10-3 is as good as it gets. I mean, that is the most wins Arizona's had in a year in 9 years? Rich Rod, 2014.
Only the 4th 10-win season ever.
You know what I mean? So Arizona fans have to understand like reasonable expectations. And going 10-3 is a memorable season. I mean, people were, talking about Jedd Fisch in his contract and how they should do everything they can to keep him because they want to see more 10-win seasons. The portal is going to be Brent Brennan's best friend, I feel like. He develops talent, can see talent. He's brought him into San Jose State. Getting guys out of the portal, you can't really attract them to San Jose State. Normally, players are going to those type of programs and then going elsewhere and transferring to bigger programs if they're doing so well. But as you mentioned, Lev, guys stay at San Jose State to play for Brent Brennan. But I think if they can somehow figure out a transfer portal process and also, try to recruit at a high level. I know it's going to be hard to sell the big time recruits like the T-Macs and the Raymond Politos and all that. But if you can somehow get the right guys and develop them and turn them into great players while also getting players that you spot in the transfer portal, I think if they have a nice blend of that, I think Arizona is going to be in a pretty good shape. Now, 10-win seasons, how common is it going to be? I don't know. I really don't. But hey, I did not think it was possible when Arizona went 1-11 under Jedd Fisch that we'd be talking about them being in the CFP conversation. Now, I know the CFP has changed. It's expanded to 12 teams. But it was not really in my mind that when Jedd Fisch, after going 1-11, would put Arizona in a place to where they could contend for a CFP. Jedd Fisch had exceeded my expectations. Maybe Brent Brennan could do the same thing.
Maybe he can. And I think, when you talk about like Arizona's place in sort of the ecosystem of college football, the hierarchy or whatever. Yeah, that's pretty good. We'd have to break it down, all 133 FBS programs, but that's probably about right. Washington's probably in that second tier, right? Pushing toward the first, but they're not in the first tier. I mean, the first tier is your Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, those types of places. It's an elite club. Texas, probably. Okay. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I would say so. God, they're just getting everybody they want in the portal. So,
yeah.
If you're going 7-5 and 8-4 here on a regular basis, that's pretty good.
People would.
That's pretty good.
And Arizona football fans. And Arizona fans are different with their expectations between basketball and football.
Right.
Basketball,
yeah.
If you get bounced in the Sweet 16, it's like, how dare you? How dare you lose before the Final Four?
Can you imagine if they lost by 46 points like UCLA did the other day against Utah? What the reaction would be?
It would be the sky is falling.
Right.
But losing in Arizona football, it's just kind of whatever, Like if you go, people were happy with Rich Rod going 7-5 and 6-6, like going to bowl games every single year and having.
Well, I'll play devil's advocate. Should we settle for that?
You shouldn't settle for the New Mexico Bowl every other year. You should hope for better. And Jedd has shown that Arizona can do better, but I just also think that going to the postseason, winning home games, having that one game where you upset a top 15, top 10 team. Rich Rod did that on a pretty consistent basis outside of the 3-9 year, whatever. But people were okay with that. And then he gets Khalil Tate. People were excited for that era. And then, of course, off the field stuff happens and Rich Rod is let go. But people were okay with Rich Rod. So I think if Brent Brennan can just consistently win and put together 7-5, 8-4 seasons on a consistent basis, he's going to be coaching football in Tucson for a long time.
And if you do that, you will have the occasional peak.
100%.
As Rich Rod did.
Yes.
Rich Rod had that 10-win season in 2014. We're also going into the Big 12, as we all know, and Texas and Oklahoma are exiting, stage left. So I'm not going to say it's going to be like a lot easier, but I don't think it's going to be harder.
Yeah.
It's not. There's no USC, Washington, or Oregon in that league. It's kind of wide open. maybe Utah might be the best program, and kind of seen what that's like up close. They're tough. They're physical. Lost 6 in a row to them, but beat them pretty good this past year.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think there are a lot of possibilities for Arizona to excel. And, it comes down to, like I said before, got to get the dudes. Got to get players.
Jimmy's and Joe's.
And he said this. He said during the press conference, we are a developmental program. Jedd Fisch said the same thing.
Yeah.
Develop the high school. They're going to emphasize high school recruiting and supplement with the portal, and that's exactly how you have to do it.
Yep.
Like if you got a class of, let's say, 30 in a given year, it should be about 22 high school players and 8 portal guys. And you do that every year, and you make this like a place that people want to be. Make it fun. He talked about that too.
Swaggy B.
Swaggy B. Like that's the culture piece, which is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but I think it's really meaningful, and I think it's meaningful in the sense of keeping your players and coaches around. And that's how you get better.
Absolutely. All right, Lev. I think we covered everything.
Yeah, we're going to be around.
Yeah.
Aren't we?
Yeah.
For a while?
We'll be hanging around for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we ain't going anywhere. We do have a bunch of mailbag questions, but I think
cool.
We're going to hold off until next week.
Fun.
A lot of mailbag questions, and honestly, we've been talking about a lot. We had to address a lot because it's been a while since we've done one.
And we couldn't even do an emergency pod over the last week because things were happening so fast that by the time it would come out, it'd be dated.
Yeah.
I felt like that when I was writing.
Yeah.
Too. I'm like, we were going into, real quick, I know we're going to get out of here, but little inside baseball, we were going into Tuesday for Wednesday, and I was talking to our boss Brett Farah, what should we write about? I don't know what to write about. And that's the day that Brent Brennan got hired.
Yeah,
there was tons to write about. It was not a problem to figure out what to write about. So things are happening fast.
It's very fast,
and there's going to be more news to come and more things to talk about.
Yes, sir. Check out Lev's column on Tucson.com. You can check out all of our coverage on Brent Brennan being the new head coach of the Arizona Wildcats. Again, go to Tucson.com, download the Wildcaster app off the App Store and Google Play. Also, subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast podcast. If you're an iPhone user, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a comment. If you can comment on that, let us know what you think about the podcast. It would help us out on those platforms. We appreciate you guys for listening.